a lot of new words. Kelsey, I'm pretty sure you're smarter than me. That was awesome. So I'm Professor Brittany Brake. I'm Assistant Professor of Political Science here at Central State. And I'm lucky enough to be able to work with one of our fantastic students, Daquan Neal. Daquan, if I read you all of his accomplishments, it would take up too much time. So I'm gonna keep it short and brief because he's the star here. But he is, here's some of his accolades. He is Mr. Chaz. He holds a 4.0 GPA. He's a founding member of CSU's first Political Science Honor Society, Pi Sigma Alpha.
Yeah.
He's a founding member of the Golden Key Honor Society. He has reserved and won a Central State Honors College scholarship for holding a GPA higher than 3.5. He is also a academic convocation honoree, as you saw earlier this year. And I couldn't be prouder to work with him. So further ado, here's Daquan.
Good morning, good morning.
Good morning.
Well, how y'all doing? Good. Wide awake. So first, before we get started, I just want to give thanks to Dr. Patrick Anderson and Professor, my mentor, Brittany Brake, for assisting me with this work on this project. It was a long process, but I couldn't be more happy with the work that we turned out. So let me get this pulled up here. We good? I get all the technological difficulties out of the way. Okay, so let me take off this. So this project is about the political war on critical thinking. And one of the most important aspects of critical thinking is that we have been under a sort of influence over the last couple of decades that seeks to aim to reduce your level of critical thinking and independent thinking. And it's become more blatant over the last decade or so. So I have a quote for you here from, one of our favorite presidents. I know all of y'all love him in here. He's my guy, apparently. So he says here, we won with evangelicals, we won with young, we won with the old, we won with highly educated, we won with the poorly educated. I love the poorly educated. That's what I mean by how blatant it's become. He's openly admitting to you that he likes that you're poorly educated. This is another example. Florida Department of Education and Governor Ron DeSantis banned AP African American Studies in Florida. This is where you guys get involved. How specific individuals, more individuals in power, political people who have influence, want people that look like you to not think critically and not think independently. So first we have to break down what critical thinking is. We'll identify what it is, why it's important, why you need it, how it's under attack, who is attacking it, and we'll identify some of those with some logical fallacies and things like that, and why it's so prevalent for us to be able to combat it. So what critical thinking is. So the Oxford Dictionary defines critical thinking as the objective analysis and evaluation of an issue in order to form a judgment. Now, critical thinking has a different philosophical definition. It's defined as the ability to think clearly and rationally about what to do or what to believe. Critical thinking is interested in the type of reasoning you use when you form your beliefs and the opinions. The type of reasoning you use when you form your beliefs and opinions, and whether you have good reasons to believe what you believe. So when you think why you believe a thing, you have to reflect on that and say, why do I believe that? How good are you at doing that? And how often do you do that? Critical thinking is concerned not with what you believe, but rather how or why you believe it. So we have to identify some of the things that make a person a critical thinker. I'll stand over here so I can, not get away. A critical thinker has the ability to understand logical and reasonable connections between ideas, identify, construct, and evaluate arguments, detect inconsistencies in common mistakes and reasoning. That's very important, because if you're going to be a critical thinker, you have to hear somebody's thought processes, and when they tell you something, you have to be identified hey, that doesn't sound very right. Just that idea alone, saying, that don't sound right. What you just said just doesn't sound right to me. Let's talk about that. So you have to be able to solve problems systematically. That sounds like a thing like mostly in math. In math and science, you have a system put in place that helps you solve problems. Identify the relevance and importance of ideas and reflect on the justification of one's own beliefs and ideas. That's that self-reflection. Reflect on your own ideas. So why is critical thinking important? So critical thinking enhances language and presentation skills. Critical thinking promotes creativity. Critical thinking is crucial for self-reflection. I'm going to be big on self-reflection. I feel like that's one of the number one things you have to have as a critical thinker is to look at yourself and question and criticize yourself and say, what I said don't sound very right even to me. Good critical thinking is the foundation of science and democracy. If you do not have good critical thinking, you will not have a civilized society, period. So, the California Critical Thinking Disposition Inventory, it's a mouthful, I know. Don't try to say it with me, it takes a lot. So this is a tool that is used by philosophers, political scientists, and psychologists alike. It is a psychological test that is used to measure whether people are disposed to think critically and how disposed you are to think critically. It measures 7 different thinking habits, each of which is related to the individual's critical thinking ability. So these 7 here: truth-seeking, open-mindedness, analyticity, systematicity, confidence in reasoning, inquisitiveness, and maturity of judgment. I like these two because it just makes you sound smart when you say them. Hey, how's your analyticity going? It's just one of those things that you go out there. So if you want to sound smart, throw those two things out. So we'll break down these because these are heavily important in the ideas of critical thinking. So what is truth seeking? It's very self-explanatory. How hard did you try to get to the truth? And did you try to understand how things really are? So when you ask a question, did you just accept the information that was presented to you? Or did you just jump to your own conclusion and just say, nah, that's it? Open-mindedness. This is very huge for me because I feel like this is one of the keys to self-growth and self-reflection. How receptive you are to new ideas, and are you receptive of ideas that you do not agree with? Analyticity, smart word. Do you try to understand the reasons behind things? Do you act impulsively, or do you evaluate the pros and cons of your decisions? Systematicity, another smart word. Are you systemic in your thinking, and do you break down complex problems into parts? That's the essence of systematicity. How you are breaking down problems in order to form a solution. That is what systematicity is in a nutshell. Confidence and reasoning. This is something you have to be careful with in the field of critical thinking, because if you have confidence in reasoning, it is how confident you are in your own judgment, and do you have a way of evaluating your own thinking. The reason why I say you have to be careful with this is because if you're too confident in your reasoning, you become closed-minded.
Ooh.
And that's the important part about it, is that if you have too much of this, you start to lose this. And you don't want that. So it's about keeping a balance between your open-mindedness and your confidence in your reasoning. You have to be confident enough to be able to support what you're saying, but not too confident to ignore what other people are saying. So inquisitiveness. Are you curious about unfamiliar topics and resolving complicated problems? That's just, your curiosity. Like, how interested are you in what you're studying and what people are telling you? Maturity of judgment. This just means don't jump to conclusions. That's pretty much it. Do you jump to conclusions? Yes or no? Do you try to take the experiences and personalities of others into account before coming to conclusions? So one of the factors that goes right into critical thinking is cognition versus metacognition. I'll explain that to you real quick. Cognition is defined as the brain's ability to process information. And metacognition is the act of thinking about how our brains process information. Simply put, cognition is thinking. That's what your brain does on its own. And metacognition is thinking about thinking. It's thinking about why you think the way you do. So we'll talk a little bit about the difference between meaning something. What does it mean to know something or believe something? Is having knowledge the same as being correct? If you say, I know this thing, are you right? Just because you know it. If you believe something to be true, and it is true, does your belief in it matter? So if you believe that a thing, if I believe the sky is blue, but it turns out that the sky actually is blue, does it matter whether I believe it is or not? Is there a difference between knowing something and believing something? Truth value is the state of being true, false, or indeterminate. So how much truth value do the statements that you have hold? False beliefs, that is simply thinking something or having an opinion that doesn't make it true. Your opinion on something does not immediately validate it. If one has belief, knowledge is lacking. If one has knowledge, belief is unnecessary.
Ooh. You better say that.
To be a critical thinker is to be scientific. Science is testable, refutable, and falsifiable. The only genuine test of a theory or idea is one that is trying to disprove it or falsify it. So if you have an idea and you go to try to test it, you have to find a test that is attempting to disprove the thing that you have said or you're studying. Irrefutable ideas or theories are not scientific. Critical thinkers must be willing to give up disproven beliefs or theories. You can't just hold on to something after it's been disproven. And if you do, that affects how we're going to view you as a critical thinker. You're lacking in that department. Being certain of something causes one to close their minds to other ideas. Now, we spoke about that earlier. A scientific belief is justified when you actively look for but do not find evidence that contradicts or disproves the theory. The good thing about science is that it's true whether or not you believe in it. That's from my homie Neil deGrasse Tyson. So an important thing about this, cognitive dissonance is so fundamental to critical thinking because it is one of the things that we all are guilty of. Regardless of where you think you are academically, how wise you are, you do this. Cognitive dissonance suggests that individuals experience discomfort when holding conflicting beliefs or attitudes. This discomfort motivates them to reduce the inconsistency or discomfort. Cognitive dissonance theory suggests that we have an inner drive to hold all our attitudes and beliefs in harmony. So you want a harmonious balance in your brain with all of your ideas and beliefs. You don't want any conflict up in here because it'll drive you crazy. So when there is an inconsistency between attitudes or behaviors, dissonance, something must change to eliminate that dissonance. So I like this one here because it's saying, look into new information and possibly accept that we have been making poor decisions or ignore the new information in favor of our bad habits. And you see the dude like sweating like that. I really want to keep my bad habits so bad. So I have a quick video here for you that shows and displays what happens when a person is experiencing cognitive dissonance and what they do after they experience it. So cognitive dissonance in action, this mental conflict can be eliminated in one of two ways. The first being that the individual will acknowledge that they may have been wrong in their belief. They might accept that. The second being that they may be likely to reinterpret the conflicting evidence to reaffirm their pre-established belief. So the evidence that you gave them that conflicted with what the belief they already had, they might reinterpret that and say, no, that information actually proves me right. And I'm gonna show you that right now. So,
Yeah.
Switch this. I remember how to do it.
If you feel like things don't add up right now, you're not alone. So we've lowered the price.
I like
of your
IKEA.
favorite product.
Right.
We find new ways to go low. It's why we're here. That's a promise, not a promo.
Last weekend, the Trump Freedom Tour, comprised of Don, his son, and a...
So this clip is where somebody is presenting the ideas to this person. They have a belief system. He is being presented information that directly contradicts his information, and I want y'all to pay attention to what he does, how he reacts when he has this information presented to him. So you can see that when he's like, they would rather just pretend it didn't happen. They would rather just be like, nah, I didn't hear nothing about that. We all are recognizing what's happening there. They're trying to pretend like they didn't, no, we don't know nothing about that. So here's an even better example of somebody who has a confirmed belief, and you'll see the links that somebody will go to hold on to that belief. You see the wheels turning. He's trying to process the information he was just given. This person is a Trump supporter who believes that the election was stolen, and he states before that he trusts Bill Barr. He trusts this guy. So he shows him on video this guy saying, this didn't happen. He's feeding him lies. Right now, his brain is dealing with that discomfort. He's right now experiencing this discomfort and he does not know what to do. So watch what he says. So you see what he did. He's refusing to accept it. He refuses to accept that this person who he just said was credible could possibly be giving down truthful information. So now he says, that couldn't have happened. I don't believe it. I can't fathom it. Therefore, he turned on it. So that is the experience. You watched his brain, you watched his eyes roll back into his head while he tried to understand what he was being shown. Okay, I'm good to go. So what we just watched was cognitive dissonance in action. So what do you think was going on in the minds of the people interviewed? You could see when he paused, his wheels was turning. He was trying to keep it together. He didn't really know. And what did you observe when they were confronted with evidence that was in conflict with their preconceived notions? That is important whenever you have a disagreement with somebody or somebody is confronted with information that is disproving their belief that they already have. Just watch their body, watch what they do, watch what they say. They oftentimes will take a moment to process what you're saying to them, the validity of it, and how they can come back and say, no, you're actually wrong because I said so. So, confirmation bias, I like this one because I think that we're guilty of this as well. Confirmation bias is the tendency for people to process information by looking for or interpreting information that aligns with their already existing beliefs or theories. We all do that. We all like feeling right. So this often results in a person ignoring information that is not consistent with what they already believe. So I got a quick 10-second clip of something that really, it makes me laugh every time I watch it.
If you're worrying,
Oh boy.
know there's someone.
Children's hospital.
Next! Next! Come on!
Vaccines cause autism?
Well, I have 1 million results that say they don't, and 1 result that says they do.
I knew it.
Just because I have it doesn't mean it's true!
So if you're not familiar with College Humor, this is a College Humor video. They make a lot of funny videos like this, but the idea is that he explains to her, one, just because I have it, just because Google has it doesn't make it true, and two, he had thousands and thousands of results showing, hey, that's not true, that's not factual, but I have one result from this person that says it could be, and she immediately was like, that proves me right, I'm taking that, I knew I was right, I knew me, I'm the right one. It's all these other scientists that are wrong. So that is confirmation bias visually represented and embodied in that skit. So confirmation bias continued, I'll elaborate a little more on it. According to NASA, 97% of climate scientists agree that humans are exacerbating the effects of global warming and climate change. Now, someone who does not believe the scientific consensus of 97% of the world's climate scientists might use the arguments of the 3% of the climate scientists who do not agree with the current climate because their opinions already align with what they believe. So I'm going to believe these 3% because they're already saying the things I believe. They can also use the fact that these 3% of scientists agree with them, which makes their opinion now scientific. Because they're like, these 3% of scientists, regardless of how small a minority they are, they agree with me. As to why these 3% of scientists happen to agree with them, why they don't believe climate change is affected by humans is irrelevant. They don't care why, they just know they can say it's scientific. So one of the most important aspects of critical thinking is the Socratic method. I live by this. True wisdom is the knowledge of how little you actually know. And a quote from Shakespeare is, a fool thinks himself to be wise, but a wise man knows himself to be a fool. And asking questions is the best way to get to the truth. Of course, you would think that would be self-explanatory. It's not. The only way to gain or grow knowledge is to use your metacognitive abilities to reflect on your own thoughts and question our understanding of things. And answers are not obvious. The universe is of no obligation to make sense to you. It's another quote from my homie Neil deGrasse Tyson. Oh, and from Socrates, I cannot teach anybody anything. I can only make them think. So I'll run through a couple of the ideas of what a fallacy is, and if you have questions about what fallacies are, this is something related more towards a continuation of the previous work on rhetorical fallacies that I did last year. So I wanted to continue that research, but I'll go over what a fallacy is. A fallacy is an error in reasoning that invalidates or weakens an argument or belief. Some of these types of fallacies would include things like ad hominem poisoning the well. You may have heard these terms tossed around before in philosophical discussions. Appeal to fear, that's an attempt to persuade an audience by evoking fear. We know who does that a lot. Straw man, that's when somebody mischaracterizes the opponent's argument, so it might be easier to argue against. So that's just the basis of what a fallacy is. I can actually show this. And to conclude, I leave you with this. If we enact any kind of gun control laws, the next thing you know, we won't be allowed to defend ourselves against terrorist attacks. And when that happens, terrorists will take over our country. Therefore, gun control laws will cause us to lose our country to terrorists. This example is something that appeals to the political, ideological discussion on gun control. Because what this example is giving is that it's not only giving a slippery slope argument saying if we let them take this, it's just all gonna fall apart. It's also doing an appeal to fear. It's evoking fear. It's making people fear the idea of gun control. So like I said, go over a couple of fallacies. There's ad hominem fallacy, ad hominem poisoning the well, bad faith arguments, fallacy of avoiding the issue. I like this quote because it makes me laugh. I'll be glad to reply to or dodge your questions depending on what I think will help our election most. That's George Bush Sr. That's an actual quote from him too. Like he's well, like I said, it's blatant. It's not, you know what I mean? It's not undercover anymore. This is one of my favorite fallacies, just because I think this is such a funny quote. And so basically, word salad is defined by the Merriam-Webster Dictionary as a string of empty, incoherent, unintelligible, and nonsensical words or comments. It sounds more insulting as you read it. So many politicians will use this fallacy in a strategic way by trying to sound more intelligent, by stringing together some big or uncommonly used words in order to avoid answering tough questions. This is a rhetorical fallacy just as much as it is a logical one. So this quote is, Fox News just asked Trump what he do differently from Biden on Ukraine. We know this was a huge issue from Ukraine. And so he goes, he says, well, what I would do is, we have tremendous military capability, folks. The best military folks. That's what I'm trying to And we can continues on. We have tremendous military capability. And what we can do without planes, to be honest with you, without 44-year-old jets, what we can do is enormous. And we should be doing it. And we should be helping them to survive. And they're doing an amazing job.
What?
Donald J. Trump. I watched this live. So if anybody was to see this and they say, he didn't actually say that, I could pull up the actual clip of him saying this. I watched it happen. I watched the interview with Sean Hannity. I watched the softball questions. This was supposed to be a softball question. It wasn't even a tough one, and he could not answer that. So this is something that you have to be on the lookout for fast-talking politicians or people in leadership who want to avoid accountability. The burden of proof, I think that's something that is very common in more recent times. It's the idea where, when someone has an outrageous or unfounded theory or belief, and it makes someone else's responsibility to disprove it. So Donald Trump won the 2020 election. Prove to me it wasn't stolen. The earth is flat. Prove to me that it's round. They're making it your responsibility to, fix their incoherent thoughts. So we cover misinformation, which is very important in this day and age. I probably won't have time to cover that though. And disinformation, which, I can give you a brief synopsis. Misinformation is information that is untrue or semi-untrue, and it is unintentionally presented as a fact. So somebody might get some information and think, oh, this is credible, I'm gonna put it out here, but it's actually false. That is misinformation. It is sometimes when false information is spread on accident. Disinformation is false or inaccurate information, especially which is deliberately spread with intention to deceive. So somebody knowingly spreads information that they know is false. This is false, it'll harm somebody. That's my point of putting it out there. I want people to know that. So I have a story here. It says, Biden alcohol czar says U.S. may follow Canada. Limit beers to 2 a week. So this is a story ran by Fox News that they know is false information, where they're trying to scare people into thinking that Biden is going to force people to only drink 2 beers a week. They knew it was false, but they ran with it anyway. You can see here on social media, for you, 2 beers per week. For Hunter, all you can smoke crack butter. So, but you can see that this is a person who saw this and picked up that story and was like, oh yeah, like, I believe it immediately. In conclusion, how well do you think you know something? You do not truly know something unless you can explain it to someone who does not know or understand it. And if the person now understands whatever it is that you were explaining, then you can say you know it. If not, then maybe it is time for you to reevaluate what you think you know and what you actually know. That's fine. Say everything I gotta say. Cool. Oh, yes.
I have a question for you. That, for example, like, you know, I'm like a scientist, so I'm just talking in that perspective that, like our prefrontal cortex, which is a part of the brain, which is the front right here, right? So basically, that what it does is that it just regulates your thoughts, right? It regulates your emotions and the action, basically, right? So sometimes, you know, we say, well, our head is hurting, things like that, right?
Right.
I think that people critically think you can see people's eyebrows gets like, you know, tense.
Yeah, they frown their brow a little bit.
Cortex basically is that the one you were talking about, you know, action, reaction, and thoughts. So what you're talking about is that when people think critically, critical thinking means you listen first
Yes.
and analyze it, and then you react.
Yes.
A lot of people react without even thinking. So what example you gave in the last, they didn't even think about what they're talking about because
No.
they don't know who's going to quote them because false information can never be quoted.
Yes.
It's always going to be false. So who can prove that? So
Yes.
people don't have time to prove that too.
Yeah, and it's huge.
Yeah. And I think second thing that I want to find out from you is that I think you were mentioning about the brain concept because see subconscious mind and conscious mind, right? See the subconscious mind and the conscious mind. See conscious mind we are all talking like this here, right?
Yes.
Subconscious mind is what even when you're sleeping, mind is still thinking. It's still processing the information. Next year you see a lot of people are like, you know, frigidity, some people are tired, some people are because they're in a night sleep that they can be thinking about this. So I think those are the two things that you maybe, you know, investigate more about.
Yeah.
Conscious mind, the subconscious mind.
Yes.
And there's the movie or I think it's a video called The Secrets. Anyone has watched it? If not, then I would definitely recommend it's called The Secrets. The Secrets are what you think. You were actually mentioning about believing and seeing it, right?
Yes.
A lot of people see, I believe when I see it. Sometimes you have to believe to see it.
Yes.
You don't see before you believe. So that's a thing. What you think routinely, it will come back to you.
Yes. Yeah.
The
Absolutely.
theory of relativity, nobody knew, right?
Yes.
Theory of relativity, how the apple goes down, things like that. Like people say sun, you know, rises in the east, which is not true. Because Earth rotates, not the sun, right? So a lot of people think that. So anyways, so those are certain kind of things came to my mind, you know, 'cause I read a lot of John Maxwell's books and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
those are the things that, you know, so that's what my thought was.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. I appreciate that. Yes.
So what impact do you think aligning content with interests, like your advertising that you see and the news stories that you see, has had on our ability to critically think?
I think that a lot of us are in a position where we are ready to prioritize comfort over fact. So I don't necessarily blame the people who are taking advantage of that fully because the market is there. So if you're simply just a business person who wants to take advantage of a market that, you know, a lot of people are making profit for or gaining political influence out of, you know, that's why I say it's more or less up to us. We have to eliminate that desire for us to be comfortable. We have to get comfortable with the idea of being uncomfortable with our thinking. You know, so if we have that discomfort from our cognitive dissonance, we have to be ready to accept that and embrace that feeling. And we also have to be ready to be wrong. And I think that we are so in this position, we're ready to be comfortable and right, that it's easy to be preyed upon by people. It's easy to be preyed upon. Yeah, he's
like,
for real. He said, say that. Yeah, it's very easy to be preyed upon by people who wish to take advantage of your comfort, you know. And the idea of you saying I'm right, and all I need is somebody who is in a influential position to say, yeah, you're right. You're definitely right. Whatever it is that you're thinking, I think it too. They don't have to think that, but you have enough people who are willing to prey on that. So I think that that's the position that we're in right now. Yeah.
You mentioned about being self-critical, right? So how does someone know that they are being too hard on themselves for being self-critical?
I feel like I am probably one of the most qualified people to talk about that because my mentor knows this. I'm one of the hardest people on myself, and I'm still working on it. But I look at it as a thing of I'd much rather be harder on myself than too easy on myself. You know, so I look at it as saying that, you know, if I'm hard on myself, I can give myself a little bit of grace from time to time, and I can work on that, and I can get better with that. But if I'm always just kind of thinking highly of myself and always constantly thinking I'm in the right, then I feel like I'm in a harder position to self-reflect. And I feel like if I'm already in a position where I'm always self-reflecting, whether or not I'm being hard on myself, I can grow out of that and reflect on myself in a healthy way. And I feel like that's what's been part of my journey, is that I've gone from being self-reflective in a self-loathing or almost self-hateful way to where now I can self-reflect and say, we've grown from here. How can we grow from where we're at now? And how can we reflect on our ideas to improve on them? How can I reflect my ways of communicating? So I think that for people who are hard on themselves, I think that you have to look at the alternative and look at, if you are not hard on yourself, who will push you harder than you, you know? So I think that as long as people can change their perspective on how they view their self-reflection, I think they'll be fine. One of my first professors ever told me, when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change.
Oof.
Yes.
So I have lots of things to say. I'm going to try and be concise. First
Of
of all,
course.
a praise. Your comments just now on grace are so apropos and right in alignment with your very first couple of slides when you said you can't be too confident to where
Yes.
you can't change, right? So that's self-reflection and grace. So that's my praise,
Thank you.
right? I do actually have a question and a critique,
Okay, yeah.
and a challenge.
Oh,
Okay,
I'm all for
so
it.
my question is, in the research you've done, which has been extensive and wonderful talk, by the way,
Thank you, thank you.
have you done any research that was quantitatively based versus qualitatively based?
So the previous research study that I did was actually more quantitative than this one. So that's one of the tough parts about this, is that it's part of a three-part project
Yes.
series that I'm working on. This was one of the ones where I kind of thought more about people who are visual learners. And I was like, if we're going to talk about rhetorical fallacies, and we're going to talk about logical fallacies, and we're going to talk about critical thinking, let me give examples to people of real life examples of these instances occurring, so people can understand that it's easy for them to grasp it. And I feel like sometimes when you give quantitative presentations, some people can get lost in it. They can get lost in the terminology or the numbers.
Absolutely true.
So I think in the previous one, it was more related to presidential rhetoric and impacts on voter attitudes, where I took research from Pew Research studies, self-surveys, and studies like that could give me actual numerical data to show how many people voted in the 2016 election after more inflammatory rhetoric was used compared to 2012.
Nice.
And so, if you're interested in that previous study, I have that as well.
I am. I'm gonna get to my hip.
Yeah.
So your last slide. If you can go back to it.
Maybe. Are we? Oh, hold on. I didn't mean to close it out. Bring me back. This one here.
Yes, sir. So you said there, you don't truly know something unless you can explain it and to someone who does not know or understand it, right? But then you had Socrates that says, I can't teach anybody anything, I can only help people to think.
Exactly.
So how do those two things exist without that juxtaposition?
Yeah, so very good question. So one of the things about this is that it is more of a confidence and reasoning thing. And I feel like that's one of those things that when I look back in the future, I could go back and reword that, because I want to say, rather than saying you do not truly know something, you know, because it's the idea of knowing something. But I would rather say you can't say that you know this without being able to explain it and support what you're explaining, and not only back that up, but also make it to where this person who heard you speak now understands what it is that you were trying to communicate. They don't have to necessarily believe it, but they understand. So your ability to communicate your ideas, to me, is a reflection on your understanding of those ideas you hold. And so I feel like the way that it's worded here can bring some problems.
Putting up a bit of a dichotomy.
Yeah, it brings that, a little bit. So I might reword those things.
Here's my suggestion. I love this idea of bringing together things that we can all see and intersect with, right,
Mhm.
approachable,
Mhm.
and I was challenging you to maybe take this to the next level in your next study. And I think a good cohort to look at would be college professors. Because we are very much so in this space, and we have to deal with these very issues in our classrooms.
Right.
And I'm wondering if there's any kind of a correlation between how we deal with those and what our student evaluations say we're dealing with those. Because I think that cognitive dissonance that we were just talking about with Socrates in that statement
Yes.
is right at the fulcrum of that. And I'd love to see what you come up with.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. I'll definitely take that into consideration. Yes.
One quick question.
Mhm.
You mentioned that you were using these examples so that people can relate, qualitative assessment, right?
Yes.
He asked you a question about quantitative.
Mhm.
Was there a particular reason? The country is divided and there are way different political ideologies.
Yeah, yes, sir.
So, and you chose to give examples from one side of the political ideology.
Yes,
Right?
yes.
Was that a particular reason for
So I believed, from my personal experience, I believe that I wanted to go with the political ideology that I felt was more guilty of having these logical and rhetorical fallacies. And I also felt that I wanted to look at the political part of the spectrum that has the more inflammatory language. And I think that when I look at, the right side of the aisle or right leaning, I tend to find more inflammatory language, and I tend to find a lot more prevalence of these logical and rhetorical fallacies. This doesn't mean, just because of these examples, that this is not prevalent on left leaning and people who are independent or people who are moderate. This occurs, and that's why earlier in the presentation I say that we are all guilty of many of these fallacies. We all experience cognitive dissonance, and we all like feeling right. So this is the idea of us all coming together and understanding, recognizing these ideas of critical thinking and these fallacies, and self-reflecting within ourselves. So these examples, I'll be honest with you, they're just easy because they're so blatant. So that's the main reason why they got selected. Yes, ma'am.
This is just piggybacking real quick. I'm a communications specialist. I'm a communications person for Land Grant, and I just want to piggyback on what Dr. Socrates said, because it was a thought I had.
Yes.
So that you don't lose people in the future, I think that it would be, you should have a balanced perspective, because if you do have those people, you're gonna automatically lose them. They're gonna cut you off. They will shut off their critical thinking right off the bat. And so I would just encourage you to, as you move forward, to have balance on both sides.
I can completely understand that. I think one of the reasons, and I spoke with my mentor about that, because I did have that conflict, and I was able to kind of find some comfort in the fact that I think that I've come with this sort of acceptance, and that because this perspective where I'm kind of targeting some people who are right leaning, some more conservative, it's not necessarily that I'm targeting, but you guys will notice it. And many people who have those conservative or right wing affiliations might notice it. But I introduce you to the concept of critical thinking. And I feel like that's the first initial thing I want people to grasp. And if I lose you after because of the examples, then I feel like we need to go back to the first part of critical thinking. We need to understand that I'm going to make you uncomfortable. I'm going to make those people uncomfortable. Yeah, absolutely. And that's why I say that this is something that's prevalent, and I reflect on that. It's all of us. Like I said, I use these examples because they're so easy to find, because they're so prevalent and they're so extreme, tending to be on the right wing and far extremist, movements like that. So I don't want, I was gonna say we can talk back and forth about it.
I realize. All right.